One of the other pieces that we wanted to talk about was that open source software libraries will become the primary target. We saw these attacked a number of different times over the past year in a number of different ways. Some of these have been extraordinarily creative. So, if you're used to using Git, or you are used to having having access to your favorite open source library that's going to make your program a little bit better, if you're out there coding securely, you may need to revisit some things with some of the latest hacks. Now, Aaron, you had some thoughts on this one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so this is in the 2023 predictions, but you're right. We've seen this a lot. I would say predominantly in the latter half of this year. So it's accelerating, and it's such a rich target. Modern software, modern applications is built with layers and layers of libraries, and there is a temptation as a developer to just go find the thing that does the thing that you want and bring it in, right? It requires very little thought and introspection, and your goal as the developer is to finish your product or the piece of functionality you're working on. And you want to do that quickly and, in a relatively secure fashion. To really audit all of the things that you pull in every time you pull something in, some of these libraries are big. You're asking a developer to go and, who might not be a security expert, to go and audit thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of lines of code that he's pulling in. I feel like we need a different approach, but I'm not sure what that approach is. I could see that, if you make those libraries smaller and smaller, obviously there are limits, right? Some of these are big things like OpenSSL, huge project, Apache. It gets pulled into all sorts of products, and maybe not necessarily as a library, but certainly as a component. But pulling in smaller functional sets of code would at least make things slightly more manageable. We're never going to get away from libraries and code reuse, and we probably shouldn't. It's what gives us huge efficiency gains. But it's a big problem, and I don't see a great answer. I think, and I said this in the predictions article, I think software bill of materials, SBOMs, is going to give us a leg up on at least identifying what we're using now, because that too is a problem, that losing visibility of all of the things that we've consumed into the products that we already created. But SBOMs aren't going to fix the problem of, a Python module being stolen or ownership being taken by a malicious actor and then malicious code inserted into that, and then you consuming it. An SBOM will tell you consume it, and therefore you can figure out that you're using something that has been popped, but it doesn't help you secure it on the front side. The only way I can see to do that is to make what we consume smaller and more easily understood, and to be more introspective when we consume it.
I think, for me, open source and library kind of attacks are fascinating because, again, it's, threat actors can spend hours, days, or weeks attacking one endpoint and one application for one customer or one victim. You attack a software library and you've potentially affected thousands, tens or hundreds of thousands of people. So for them, economies of scale are fantastic. There are two main targets I see from a software library and a kind of code reuse point of view. The one is those legitimate code libraries being infected with malicious code. So it could be developers having their credentials stolen, MFA bypassed, or any of those things. And that's a significant problem. We've even seen, hacktivists deliberately infected their own code. So even software developers aren't necessarily entirely above board. But the other side to me is the more almost just as difficult in theory to protect against, which is developers using illegitimate code libraries, because they might just be searching PyPy or some other GitHub or code repository for library which performs some function, and they'll find something and what brilliant, let's import it. Sometimes it might be a library that's been malicious library that's been deliberately named to look or sound just like a legitimate library. For a lot of developers, as we said, that just want to get on and do their job and get this functionality, great, import library, get on, do your job. So there's those two kind of very different style of threats, if you like. But I think to Aaron's point, I'm not sure how you really deal with it ubiquitously, other than just having a kind of accurate inventory of all libraries. Now that really should be automated in some way, and I think it's only having some way in auditing or cataloging and auditing those libraries that will then allow you to at least retrospectively go back and check, do these libraries, are they from the publisher that you trust? Do they conform to some name standard or maybe co-signing some other kind of certificates? So yeah, I think inventory and visibility is going to be key.
I think Tafara described this as Russian dolls when we were talking about one of these attacks. If you're, and for me, if anyone's having a hard time understanding how this could impact you, well, I don't build code. I don't install software from source. I don't do that kind of thing. Well, but you do install open source projects or software on your machine in some way, whether it's Windows or Linux or Mac. There are open source libraries that are used, or even worse, to Farah's point from a couple months back, you may have one library that relies on another library. So the library you think you're relying on may have the compromise somewhere else in, say, a sub library, if you will.